In the heart of a pro arena, the boy once mocked made the entire gym fall silent. If you love stories like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Why don't you go home and keep dreaming about the NBA? This is gym class, not some charity for broken talent. Coach Carter's voice echoed through the gym as Elijah stepped onto the court. The whole class turned. A few laughs burst out loud, sharp, meant to cut deep. Elijah stood still, holding his old worn basketball tight to his chest like it was the only thing keeping him from breaking apart. Carter wasn't just the PE teacher. Everyone feared he was feared for the wrong reasons. Not because he was strict, but because he was cruel. To most students, he was cold. But to Elijah, the only black kid in the class, he was venomous. He made jokes that weren't jokes, comments that stung more than fists. And today, Carter came loaded. Elijah, you think holding that ball makes you somebody? You were born to lose, not to play this game, he barked. A kid in the back mimicked, throwing a ball at Elijah's head and laughed hard. The class followed Elijah, didn't flinch, but his eyes, they didn't look down this time. You're wrong, Elijah said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. You think I was born to fail? That's because you've never seen me play. Carter chuckled. Oh, really? You're gonna prove something now. What, miss a shot and blame your cheap shoes? He jerked his chin toward the farthest hoop. Way down court. Find one shot. Prove your legacy. You make it class ends early. Miss and you run 10 laps alone. The class erupted. No one believed Elijah would try, but he stepped forward, said nothing, didn't ask for a better ball, didn't pick the closer basket. He walked to mid-court, spun the ball slowly in his hands, like he'd done this 1,000 times in his mind, if nowhere else. Then he shot clean, smooth, a perfect arc. Everyone looked up, not a breath in the room, thump. It kissed the backboard, swish, straight through the net, silence like someone had cut the power. Carter froze, his face drained white. Elijah turned eyes no longer glued to the floor. Next time you try to humiliate me, he said, make sure you can actually play better. Then he walked to the bench. Behind him, the gym was quiet as a church. After that shot, Elijah didn't become a star. No one ran up to congratulate him. No one praised his form. The class dispersed like nothing extraordinary had happened. Carter never mentioned the shot in any class after that. He didn't punish Elijah, but he never acknowledged him either. Everything was buried under a strange silence, the kind adults use when truth makes them uncomfortable. Elijah understood. One shot didn't change anything, but it was a start. From that day forward, he went to practice after school, not on the school court, still crawling with judging eyes, but a cracked concrete court behind an old housing block, a place no one cared about. The hoop had no net. The ground was uneven, but to Elijah, it was sacred ground. There he shot until his arms went numb, retrieved the ball hundreds of times, dribbled until his knees ached. No coach, no cheering. Just the thump-thump of the ball echoing across a hollow space, and sometimes that sound alone was all that kept him from giving up. One evening it rained, cold steady, biting. Elijah kept shooting in the downpour, his shirt-soaked hair plastered to his face. An old man sat under a nearby awning, holding a half-finished beer, watching him, not speaking, just watching. Until Elijah missed a shot after nearly 2 hours straight, and the man slowly stood and walked over. You're holding the ball all wrong, he rasped, voice worn by cigarettes. Elijah turned cautious. You want to shoot from deep. It's not power. It's your legs. Elijah said nothing. The old man didn't leave. He picked up the ball, spun it once in his hand, and launched a shot. Smooth, effortless, dead center. What's your name? The man asked Elijah. I've trained kids like you before. Some play overseas now. But none of them practiced alone in the rain. He paused. Want to learn something real? Elijah nodded, didn't speak. But from that moment on, a thread was tied between someone who had once stood at the top and a boy clawing his way up from the bottom. And that rain didn't make Elijah sick. It washed away the lie that he was born to fail. 3 weeks after that rainy afternoon, Elijah was no longer the awkward kid who just ran laps with his head down. His shots were faster, sharper. His layups had rhythm. He'd learned to control his breathing, read defenders from the angle of their feet, and move like he finally believed in his own body. No one saw the sweat-drenched practices. No one knew, and an old man with silver hair waited for him daily, correcting form, breaking down mistakes like a ghost coach with nothing left to prove. But one day the change became impossible to ignore. The school's intramural basketball tournament kicked off at the end of the month. Small event, big attention. Elijah's class was split into two teams, and as always, he was stuck with the weaker lineup. No one expected much, not until the opening whistle blew and Elijah burst from midcourt, slicing past three defenders with fluid crossovers, then rose and scored the first layup like it was scripted. The stands froze for 2 seconds, then came the cheers. The crowd had no idea what they were watching, but they knew it wasn't the same kid. Elijah didn't stop. He passed, cut, defended, drove, scored. In the first 15 minutes, he dropped 12 volume points and set up 3 more. His name started echoing from the sidelines, first out of surprise, then out of real excitement. But with the spotlight came the shadow of resentment. In the second half, as Elijah drove past a bigger player, the coach's favorite, he was violently tripped, a deliberate leg sweep. He slammed into the floor, his knees scraping raw against the tile. The referee called only a soft foul. Coach Carter stood nearby, arms crossed. Silent Elijah got up, blood on his knee, pain radiating. But his eyes, no longer the eyes of someone just enduring. He returned to the court, limping slightly, but 5 minutes later, he was still going. And in the final seconds, with the crowd counting down, Elijah pulled up from beyond the arc, released a perfect 3-point shot. The ball spun through the air, then swished nothing but net. The gym exploded. Students screamed, even a few teachers stood. But Carter didn't move. He walked off, blank-faced. The same kids who once laughed at Elijah now said nothing. Not because they'd changed, but because they had nothing left to hold over him. Elijah didn't go home right after the game. He stayed in the corner of the court, shirt soaked in sweat, blood still seeping from his knee, but his face showed no exhaustion. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He just stared at the far basket, the place where, for the first time, and hundreds of eyes were forced to see him as a real athlete. The old man was there too, standing silently at the back entrance of the gym. Arms crossed, he didn't join the noise. Only when most of the students had left did he slowly walk over. "Your balance is better," he said, "but you still let your face show too much after getting fouled." Elijah looked up, gave a small nod. "Next time," the man added, "when they try to knock you down, look them in the eye as you stand. Don't rise like you were given a second chance. You have every right to be here." Those weren't just words. They were a warning, because the next morning, Elijah was called to the principal's office. Carter was there too. The reason there's been a complaint that Elijah displayed disrespect toward a teacher and lacked team spirit during the game. Elijah sat upright. He didn't argue. But his gaze never dropped Carter across from him, didn't look up, just held his coffee, pretending calm. "Elijah," the principal said, "you may be very talented, but here we value humility. Do you understand that?" "Yes, sir," Elijah answered. "But I think humility doesn't mean accepting being looked down on." The room went silent. For once, the principal didn't respond right away. Elijah was dismissed soon after, but he understood this wasn't about a shot anymore. What they hated was that he shattered the role they'd written for him, but he also knew something else. It was time to turn those shots into a real path. A week later, while practicing alone on the same cracked court, a young man approached. He wore a shirt with the logo of a semi-pro youth team. "I saw you play," he said. "You've got something we're looking for." Elijah looked down at the ball in his hands, then back at the man. "I don't want to be picked because people feel bad for me," he said. "I want to be picked because I'm good." The man nodded. "Then prove it this Saturday. The team's holding open tryouts." Elijah nodded back. No hesitation, because he'd been ready for a long time. The world was just now starting to see where he stood. Saturday morning, a crisp breeze swept through the back parking lot of the city sports center, where a group of young players were warming up on a polished indoor court. No laughter. No one called Elijah's name. This wasn't school. This was a semi-pro team tryout, and everyone here had one goal: earn a spot. Elijah stood at the end of the warm-up line, his gray t-shirt already soaked in sweat, and the drills hadn't even started. Around him were taller guys, some wearing pro-grade sneakers, others followed by private trainers. No one spoke to him. No one stared too long. Not out of prejudice, but because this was a place where skill spoke louder than introductions. The head coach, a fit bald man in his 30s, stepped into the center of the court and raised his voice. "You've got 2 hours. We'll evaluate defense speed, IQ, and attitude. No second chances. Show it now or go home." He scanned the faces around him, paused a second on Elijah. Not from recognition, just curiosity. The session started with brutal physical tests, sprints, verticals, agility, drills, one-on-one finishes. Elijah wasn't the biggest, but every movement he made was sharp, clean, and wasted zero energy. The coaches scribbled notes from the sidelines silent, but eyes slowly started locking on him. When it came time to scrimmage, Elijah was paired against someone a head taller, broad shoulders, a former state-level player. No one expected much, but the moment the whistle blew, Elijah didn't hesitate. He kept his dribble low, moved with surgical footwork, glided around his defender like the court bent to him. First possession, the big guy slipped, trying to block him. Second, Elijah floated a perfect teardrop into the net. Third, he stole the ball clean and took it coast to coast. One coach murmured, "This kid doesn't just play. He reads the game like a book." By the end of the tryout, only 6 players remained. Elijah was among them. A coach stepped forward and read off names for the next round. When Elijah Wright echoed across the court, he stood still for half a second. Not because he was shocked, but because he was confirming what he'd always known. If no one opens the door, you build your own. 3 weeks later, Elijah officially made the regional U17 team's reserve list. Not the starting 5, not even regular minutes, but to him, it was the first real win. A team jersey, a locker with his name assigned practice schedules, and walking into the gym wearing a number on his back. It was the kind of dream he used to think was never meant for someone like him. But inside this new world, Elijah quickly learned talent wasn't enough. Some teammates didn't speak to him. A few shook hands, but their eyes betrayed suspicion. On the court, passes to Elijah were laid low or deliberately off target. The coaches said nothing. They didn't step in. Because at this level, the unwritten rule was clear. If you want respect, you have to force them to see you. Elijah didn't complain. He arrived 20 minutes early to warm up alone, stayed 30 minutes late to practice shots and footwork. One of the assistant coaches started to notice. "This kid's got court IQ," he murmured. "Not just fast, he thinks while he moves, but praise wasn't public yet. Not here, not until you earned it with results, not effort." His chance came during a scrimmage between the first team and the reserves. A starting player was injured last minute, and Elijah was called in. No one expected much, just fill space. But 5 minutes in, Elijah intercepted a pass at midcourt, dribbled past 2 defenders, and split the defense with a laser assist. 10 minutes later, he drained a mid-range jumper from the elbow. The reserves pulled off a surprise win, and Elijah's name began floating around. Not as the new kid, but as that number 9 kid. During the post-game meeting, the head coach tapped a finger on the whiteboard and said, "Right, not bad. Keep that pace," just one sentence. But for Elijah, it was the first line of his story. That night, he got home with torn-up training shoes and a jersey without an official number yet, but he hung it neatly on the wall across from his bed. Because Elijah understood from this day forward, he wasn't training to be noticed. He was training because he'd been noticed and now had to prove why. Word about Elijah started spreading beyond the team. A short article on a local high school sports blog mentioned a reserve player's standout performance with a photo of him scoring over 3 defenders. The shot didn't show his face. No name was mentioned, but everyone knew who it was. A personal social media post reshared the image with the caption, "Looks like they're giving chances to kids who can run fast from the poor end of town." The comments rolled in like a wave, some supportive, most not. "Elijah Wright? Just got lucky, one-hit wonder, he'll disappear soon. Let's see if he can actually keep it up. Starting him would wreck team chemistry." Elijah read them all, not because he craved approval, but because he'd heard this before. Doubt never shouted in your face. It whispered through questions dressed as objective analysis. And this time it didn't come from the classroom. It came from sports itself, a world he once believed only respected performance. But Elijah didn't step back. The following week, he came off the bench in a scrimmage against a high-tier academy from another state. A faster, cleaner, better organized squad. His coach wasn't planning to play him. But after a disastrous first half, the scoreboard demanded change. Elijah was subbed in at the 22-minute mark. He didn't score right away. He didn't need to. What he did was intercept 2 passes, draw a tactical foul, and launch a full-court pass that turned into an assist at minute 35 after a missed shot rebounded into chaos. Elijah snatched the ball from the air and fired a 3-pointer from just outside the arc. The ball soared, spun, and dropped cleanly through the net. Their opponent's side of the crowd fell silent. After the game, no one called him a flash in the pan anymore, but they didn't crown him a star either. They used a different phrase, the kind that cloaks dismissal and politeness. He's solid, but something's still missing. Elijah heard it, and part of him found it funny. He thought to himself, that thing they think I'm missing is the thing they've never wanted me to have. But the following month, Elijah was officially listed as part of the team's state tournament roster. The final slot, not because of luck, but because there was simply no reason left to leave him out. On paper, he was still a bench player, but on the court, he had become the team's rhythm. Every time the ball touched his hands, the game changed pace. Across the 3 qualifying matches, Elijah averaged 14 points, 5 assists, and 2 steals. But it wasn't the numbers that turned heads. It was how he played. No flash, no theatrics, just precision, cold focus, calm execution. And more than anything, he let neither praise nor criticism shift. His pulse, local sports outlets started including his name in weekend recaps. E. Wright, most efficient player of the round. A commentator remarked, "This kid doesn't yell. He lets the ball speak." One game clip began circulating online, a clean 3-pointer from deep as the buzzer ticked down to 2 seconds. The crowd erupted. Elijah turned silently and jogged back on defense. No fist pump, no celebration, just business back at school, and even Coach Carter couldn't avoid his name anymore. A student dropped a newspaper on his desk. Elijah on the front page. Carter glanced at it, paused and muttered, "Talent's not enough. Gotta have character too," no one replied. But a few students frowned because they had seen Elijah with their own eyes. Once branded a failure, now forcing an entire city to reconsider what success really looks like. That night, Elijah received an email from a regional development academy, one directly linked to semi-pro and pro recruitment. Pipelines. Subject official, tryout invitation. No flattery, no promises. Just, "We've been watching your past 4 games. If your level holds, we'd like to see you next month." Elijah didn't reply right away. He hit play on the game footage, watching that final shot again. Not out of pride, but because he wanted to remember that moment, the exact second no one could call it luck anymore. The training facility sat on the northern edge of the city, far from any neighborhood, surrounded by glass buildings, private courts, and a gate that bore the academy's steel black logo. Below it, a phrase was etched into stonework: "Beats talent when talent doesn't work." Elijah stood in front of it for nearly a minute, not in awe, but because that sentence felt like it had been waiting for him. The tryout spanned 3 days. Elijah was placed in Group 2, 16 players from all over, each with a resume as long as a scouting sheet. Some had played internationally, some were state MVPs. Elijah was the shortest, the only one not from a major academy, and definitely the least acknowledged. Day 1 physical testing. 2 players were cut after 2 hours. Day 2 team scrimmages, 4-on-4 constant rotations. No player allowed to keep their preferred role more than twice. Elijah was assigned point guard, something many believed would overwhelm him. He didn't object. He also didn't explain. In the first match, Elijah touched the ball on the opening possession. Another player, taller, quicker, visibly annoyed, ripped it from his hands during a drive and gave him a glare that said, "Let me handle this." But on the next fast break, Elijah didn't pass. He broke through 2 defenders, drew a foul from the third, and floated a clean teardrop over a contested block straight into the net. No celebration, no eye contact. He just jogged back on defense. 5 minutes in, the head coach blew the whistle and pulled everyone in. "Some of you are strong, some of you are stars, some of you are loud," he said, scanning the group. "But the ones who make it are the ones who know when to act without asking permission." Then he looked straight at Elijah. No nod, no praise, but he didn't need to. From that moment on, no one tried to take the ball from Elijah again. Day 3 of tryouts, the final internal scrimmage. 12 players remained split into 2 teams, playing 3 8-minute quarters. Every step, every pass, every look was watched. This wasn't a practice anymore. It was a stage where one wrong move could cost everything. Elijah was named captain of Team Blue, a choice that made a few faces tighten. Some shook their heads. One player, Miles, a standout forward, looked Elijah up and down, then muttered to a teammate, "Great, another inspirational project for diversity points." Elijah heard it, said nothing. First quarter team. Red attacked hard, pressing constantly. Elijah slowed the tempo, stayed calm. He controlled the dribble, made clean passes, waited for gaps. By minute 4, he threaded a pass through the defense for a fast break score. A minute later, he drove inside and floated in 2 more. The coach nodded. Took notes, but by the second quarter, Miles made it clear he didn't want to share. He held the ball longer, ignored passing options, went solo and failed. Repeatedly, Team Blue lost momentum. During a timeout, Elijah kept it short. Move the ball quicker. Stick to rhythm. We'll find space, Miles sneered. Who made you the coach? Third quarter tension peaked. Elijah stopped, waiting for Miles. He used spacing, speed, and off-ball movement to shift the defense. He created plays without needing permission, drawing defenders and feeding clean looks to teammates. Slowly, Team Blue pulled even. In the final minute, Elijah dribbled into the arc, faked a jumper, then flicked behind the back pass to the wing. Open shot. Score game winner, the buzzer sounded. Team Blue won. Elijah didn't look at the scoreboard. He just stood still, took a deep breath, and turned toward the coaching staff. The head coach exchanged a brief word with the scouts. Then he turned to the court and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Right, you stay. Everyone else, thank you for coming." The other 11 stood still for a moment. No one spoke. But as they walked off, a few glanced back at Elijah, not with contempt, but with envy and caution. Yet 1 week after the internal game, Elijah received the official announcement from the academy. He'd been selected for the Special Development Squad, a 6-player rotation trained to compete in age group semi-pro circuits. Reserve was no longer his label. Now it was emerging talent. He had a dedicated jersey, a fixed locker, and most importantly, the weight of representing the academy's name. Training doubled. Intensity tripled. Every movement was recorded for breakdown. Gym check-ins were down to the minute. Diet, sleep schedule, everything tracked. No one called him Elijah the student anymore. They called him Right. At times, Elijah felt mechanical, a stopwatch and sneakers, but he didn't complain. He understood this wasn't about proving he belonged anymore. This was about not losing himself in a system that looked clean, but wasn't always kind. His first game in the academy's colors was a friendly against another city's elite team. Over 500 people filled the stands. Cameras streamed live. Pro scouts sat front row. Elijah didn't start, but was subbed in midway through the second half. The score was 45-42. They were down. The moment he stepped on court, 2 defenders swarmed him. No time to adjust, no room to slip up. But Elijah wasn't tense. He moved like the court had been waiting for him. He twisted through the press, avoided the steal, and zipped a sideline pass that opened a scoring lane. 3 possessions later, they scored 6 unanswered points. No one cheered his name, no applause, but the coaching bench stood up when the final buzzer rang, 61-59, when the coach walked down the line, tapping each player. At Elijah, he paused and said, "Right, no flash, just results." Elijah nodded. But inside, he knew it wasn't about how many points he scored. It was about making himself indispensable, even to people who still refused to call him a cornerstone. One Monday morning, Elijah got a call from an assistant with a Division II professional basketball club. The voice on the other end didn't waste time. "We've reviewed your data and footage from the past 2 months. The head coach wants you in for a tryout next week." No flattery, no fluff. A real offer, a real chance. Elijah thanked them, hung up and sat on his bed for a long while, staring at his worn-out shoes. Part of him wanted to scream. Another part felt calm. Not because this was the finish line, but because, for the first time, someone came looking for him, not for his struggle, but for his skill. But word travels fast. Just a few days later, while Elijah was at school, an old teacher approached him. A man who'd once taught his 10th grade class and also once told the room, "Hard work doesn't always lead to success, especially when your circumstances are already working against you." The teacher smiled. "Heard you've got a tryout with some big club. Guess that's social media for you. Do a few flashy things and they blow it up like you're the next LeBron." Elijah stopped shooting, turned toward him. He didn't argue, but his eyes weren't the same as before. "You once told me," Elijah said, voice steady, "that not everyone who works hard succeeds." I remember that. "But I also realized not everyone who succeeds gets recognized, especially if people dismiss them from the start." The teacher paused, said nothing. Elijah turned back to the court, kept shooting. Every swish echoed off the gym walls like quiet rebuttals, truths that didn't need yelling to be heard. That evening, in a small office tucked inside the academy, Elijah signed the official paperwork for his trial, formally placed on the recruitment list for a professional team. No paycheck yet, but enough to silence everyone who had ever said "you won't." And as Elijah walked out of the coach's room, still holding his old worn-out ball, he didn't need photos, didn't post online, didn't seek praise because the road from overlooked to invited had already spoken loud enough for him. Tryout morning. The pro club's training facility wasn't loud or electric like Elijah once imagined. No banners, no audience. Just the steady rhythm of sneakers on hardwood, the sharp chirp of whistles and cold white lights hanging over the court. Elijah entered through a side door wearing an unnumbered training jersey, old ball tucked under his arm. An assistant coach scanned the list, barely glanced up. You right zone D, group 3, no greeting, no one waiting for him. And clearly no one expected much. Group 3 had 7 players. The other 6 were tall, stoic silent. No one asked Elijah's name. During warm-ups, one player bumped into him and didn't apologize. Another muttered. Let me guess, another kid writing viral clips and lucky shots. Elijah said nothing, just nodded politely and walked to the corner. First shot, swish, second clean, third glass, slight spin. A coach off to the side gave the faintest nod, said nothing. Tryouts opened with a series of drills, reaction time tactical reads, group movement. Elijah didn't showboat, but every time he touched the ball, the tempo shifted. Not because he slowed down, but because he controlled the rhythm. His way, crisp steals, perfectly timed passes. No flash, just clarity. One assistant murmured into his mic, "Number 12, not flashy, but handles like he's been pro." 3 years. In the 3-on-3 session, Elijah was grouped with 2 players. No one wanted one. Too hot-headed, one too clumsy. Automatic loss, some whispered. But during the 7-minute scrimmage, Elijah never complained. He moved without the ball, turned teammate mistakes into fast breaks. When double-teamed, he didn't force it, he waited. Let defenders get impatient. Then with the score tied and the clock dying, Elijah dribbled up, faked one step, back and fired from beyond the arc. The ball flew, dead center. No rim, no backboard. Swish, pure net. The gym fell silent. One head coach closed his notebook, nodded once, nothing more needed. Elijah turned, walked back to midcourt. No fist pump, no grin, just tightened his grip on the ball as if to remind himself. This wasn't the summit, it was just a door and he had kicked it open. After the tryout, Elijah wasn't given an immediate answer. We'll be in touch within 72 hours, a coach told him bluntly. He nodded and left without pressing. But as he stepped outside the training center, a man in a suit was already waiting. Right? The man asked. Elijah stopped, cautiously nodded. I'm with the club's internal media team. If you're selected, we'd like to prep a short video for the new signings. Can we borrow you for a few minutes? Elijah hesitated. He'd never stood in front of a camera as the subject. Then he nodded. They led him into a plain white room, set up lights in a single camera. Someone behind the lens asked, if you make it, what do you want people to remember about you? Elijah paused for a few seconds. Then he spoke clearly, deliberately. Not everyone is born into a game that includes them, and not everyone gets a fair shot. But when I step on the court, I don't bring my past with me. I bring one reminder. If I don't play real, no one will even remember I was here. Camera off. The interviewer gave a silent nod. 2 days later, an email arrived. The subject line was simple, selected. Elijah didn't even need to open it. He already knew. The club released a video on its internal channel announcing the new recruits. 3 names, one from a German academy, another a former youth national team starter, and finally Elijah right guard, the quiet tempo keeper. The video included his closing quote, "If I don't play real, no one will even remember I was here." It spread quickly through the basketball community. Many comments were positive. Others were familiar. Nice words. Let's see if he lasts. But this time Elijah didn't need to respond, because for the first time in his life, his voice was out there before anyone else could speak for him. His first official game, a preseason friendly between Division II teams, not televised, but with scouts from major clubs sitting front row. Elijah wasn't in the starting 5. He sat at the far end of the bench, hood up, eyes locked on the court like he was mapping every breath in the game. By the end of the first quarter, his team was down by 11. Then at minute 13, the starting point guard rolled his ankle. The coach turned toward the bench. Right. Get in, no claps, no buzz. Just a heavy silence of expectation. Elijah stepped onto the court into a cloud of quiet doubt. First possession. He didn't pass, he drove down the middle, spun off a defender, and slung a behind-the-back assist. Clean finish. Next play, he didn't shoot. moved off ball, dragged 2 defenders to open a lane, next sequence, corner, catch, pump, fake, rise up, swish. The lead shrunk to 4. For the first time, the scouts leaned forward, and in the third quarter, Elijah ran the floor like a conductor. Not flashy, not loud, but every possession had a pulse when it passed through him. No one said his name aloud, but everyone watched, because when the ball was in Elijah's hands, the game calmed down. It had structure, it had weight. At minute 38, tie game overtime loomed. Then came a midfield steal. Elijah snatched it, broke down court. One defender stuck tight. Elijah didn't force it, just stepped back, slightly baited the lunge, and let it fly from beyond the arc. The moment the ball left his fingers, the entire gym held its breath. Swish. The net snapped sharp like a knife cutting through noise. Game over. The opposing team slumped. Elijah's teammates rushed him with high fives. He nodded. Eyes locked on the coaching bench. One nodded back. Another leaned toward a scout and whispered something. No spotlight, no roar, because Elijah Wright had just shifted the room's entire tone with the bounce of a ball in his hands. That afternoon, Elijah sat alone in the empty bleachers, still in uniform, sweat drying on his neck. No one approached, no cameras, no post-game hype, and that was fine because the people who needed to see him had seen. A staff member walked past, paused. "Hey, what's your name again, Elijah?" he replied. "Elijah Wright." The man nodded. "Yeah, I'll remember that now." Then walked on. That simple sentence kept Elijah still for a long moment, not because it was praise, not because it was fanfare, but because it wasn't mockery, doubt, or dismissal. It was recognition, unforced and quiet. That night, he returned to his small room near the academy. The hallway was silent. Elijah sat on the floor, placed his old ball in front of him, staring at it like he was looking back at his 8th grade self. The boy shoved on a school court, mocked by teachers, ignored by teammates, erased by a system built to overlook him. Then Elijah stood. No declarations, no social media posts, no live-streamed victory speech. He simply laced up his shoes, the same worn pair, and stepped outside onto an empty practice court. The wind had picked up, the air was cold, but in that space the only sound was the steady bounce of a basketball against the ground, measured, confident, unbroken. Because Elijah Wright knew one thing for sure, his story didn't end with a shot, a win, or an offer. It had only just begun. From ridiculed student to recognized athlete, Elijah carved his path without waiting for permission. Thanks for watching till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay with us through the next powerful stories.